So today is exciting. It's exciting because I am at the piano. You just heard me make some funny sounds with the piano, and I'm going to talk today about how I make those funny sounds. They are one of the types of sound that I'm using in Canticle 6, which is the new piece for piano and electronics that I'm just finished up practicing now, and I'm including in the program on a house concert in a couple of weeks. Again, if you're hearing this before January 25th at 7 p.m., you should check out the links on my webpage, zenglum.net, and stop over. I'll be playing some Stockhausen, some Arvo Part, and then this piece, Canticle 6. So the title, I talked about the title in an episode earlier this week, why it is Canticle 6, what are Canticles 1 through 5. I talked about that. But today I want to talk about this one particular sound. There's really two main families of sound that I'm using, and I'm going to talk about this second one. The second sound family is based on ring modulation, and it occurs in the third section of the piece. So just to recap quickly, there are three sections in the piece. The first is a straight performance of the Bach C major prelude from Book 1 of the Well-Tempered Clavier. So this one. Right. So I play that. That's part one. And then part two uses a series of sounds that are based on samples from my performance of the prelude, right? So while I'm playing it, I'm recording samples from it, and then those form the electronic component or element of the music in part two. And then part three is based on the ring mod sound. And it starts with the piano. So I've got my piano has a contact mic on the soundboard, and that goes directly into the synthesizer rack. So of course, without anything, just sounds like a piano. It's a lovely sound. I love the piano, of course. So the principle of ring modulation is if you modulate the amplitude of a sound very quickly, meaning at audio rate very quickly, then a phenomena called sidebands emerge. So these are frequency partials related to the original sound, but not the original sound. Sidebands that create that sort of etheric, almost robotic sound around the original pitch. So ring modulation, you can think of it as changing the volume, the amplitude of the sound, first very slowly and then very, very quickly until you introduce those sidebands. Now I can demonstrate some of this. if I change the frequency of the modulating sine wave, you'll hear the sidebands sort of like sweep around. So part of the piece is finding the frequency of that modulating wave, sine wave, and it changes every time I play it. It's not like I haven't determined it. So that sounds pretty good. But if I turn the modulating sine wave all the way as high as it will go, so you can get all kinds of different effects. And one of the options I considered was to have the frequency of this modulating wave change throughout the piece so that the harmonics or the frequencies of present changed. I opted not to do that. It can get a little bit jokey sounding if that stuff changes too much. I mean, the sweep of frequency is a wonderful sound. If I go something like... but it can outlive its usefulness pretty quickly. So that's the first part, right? I've got the mic from the piano going into this mix, this ring modulator, and then I've got a sine wave going in that modulates the amplitude of that. I've also applied then a contour, an envelope to the sound, right? So... for example, I could have the ring modulating sound just be a very short pluck that happens every time I play the instrument. So something like this, maybe. But I didn't want that. I wanted more of a melodic option. So I have an envelope. Now, an envelope is just something that changes the volume of the sound that goes into it, right? And you have an attack, which is how quickly the sound gets turned on, and you have a release, which is how long it lasts when the envelope reaches its peak. Envelopes can be very complicated. This is actually a very simple one. It's an attack, sustain, release. It doesn't have a decay in it. It only has the 3 steps, but it's quite sufficient for just about every case that I use, which is normally like this, to just put a bit of shape around what would otherwise be a very unruly sound. If I were to turn the envelope so it's very, very long, you'll hear that the ring modulated sound is pretty lively. So I like it to have that longer tail, right? Now, what the envelope has to start at a certain point. I just say, turn up the amplitude a little bit, right? And I'm doing that with a trigger that's coming from the sound of the piano, because before the audio goes into the system, I pass it through something called an envelope follower. And an envelope follower is a piece of electronics that takes the shape of the sound, the volume of the sound, and the change in volume of the sound, and turns it into something that can be applied as a controller to anything else. It doesn't have to be the volume of another sound, although it could be. What I'm using it for is the gate to trigger it. Boom. Right, so that gate triggers the envelope of the ring modulation. So you can hear that the ring modulation starts every time the piano starts. But only then, right? Now, what's particularly interesting is that it doesn't start every time, does it? That's because I've got an attenuator in between the gate and the trigger on the envelope, so that if I play quietly, the ring modulation isn't. It's still there, but it's not passing through. The envelope hasn't opened up to allow it through. Right? So it gives a bit more dynamic shape as I'm playing. It's not just this consistent sound. There's a more organic nature to how the ring modulation occurs around the sound. Okay, I do have some reverb I added. If I turn that up a little bit, that's just everyone likes a little bit of reverb. I had thought about having that be a reverb with a delay, which sounds kind of cool. It sounds kind of cool once or twice, and then it starts to sound again a bit overdone. But a little bit of reverb is nice. And then the last thing that I've got, so you've been hearing a pretty noisy sound there, right? And that's because the input sound, the piano sound, is a very rich sound. When you hear ring mod sounds in purely electronic music, it's two sine waves ring modulating each other. It sounds absolutely fucking great. I love it. The piano has a very rich frequency spectrum, right? So the outcome is just a bit too much, right? So I just added in a filter. Right? Here's the unfiltered. And now I'm just adding in a bit of a... It's actually an LFO, the Optimix. It's a low frequency, a low pass frequency filter. In very traditional ring modulation, you would have bandpass filters. You could notch the specific filters. I don't got one of those, so I use what I got, Gav. I'm sorry. But the Optimix has this lovely bongo sound that. Right. So again, unfiltered, which is great, but does sound a bit like a trash can. And put a bit of a filter on it, and all of a sudden, right. So with the filter, it becomes just a lot more nuanced, a lovely little sound. So I'm going to put this out, and you can all have a listen. More to come in the next few weeks. Some of the secrets I'm going to hold off until the concert itself, but I thought with this ring mod sound, it's something that's really iconic and something I particularly like and expect to use in many, many pieces aside from this one. I thought I would share it. So thanks for checking it out, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.